I have got to level with you. I underestimated some of the emotion and the feelings and all of this that would come with the preparations involved with getting ready for this weekend. You know, we've had 3 events, one yesterday morning, one last night, and then this morning services. And so there was a little extra preparation work from a number of people, and including myself, in preparation for this weekend. And one of the things that I did, and I alluded to this last night when I spoke, that I pulled out of an old filing cabinet a drawer that I hardly ever go to. I pulled out 3 or 4 files that are about that thick that I had not looked in for 19 or 20 years. These were files that I was using every day when I first moved here during that lead time, the 7 months leading up to opening Sunday. But after that, you know, there were new files created because we were done with what I called the prenatal period of time of leading up to the birth of the church. And so this is the first time in nearly 20 years I'd looked in some of those files, and I really didn't have much for pictures in them, although there were certain graphics like this that were in there, the original logo that we had for the church when we first got started. And all I'm going to say is when it comes to artwork and all of that, you get what you pay for. And my budget for that was 0. But that was our original logo that we started off with for the church. But here's the thing that I did not anticipate. I have found myself very humbled the last several days as I've been looking through those files, and I've been remembering the amount of work that was involved leading up to opening Sunday, and of course then beyond, and all of the. And I'm kind of a list person, and I need to be able to see it. I need to see what my checklist is. And so as I was looking through those files, there were multiple lists, long lists of things that had to be done or had to come about, and the fact that in so many cases, God led. God opened doors at just the right time. Not as soon as what I would have liked sometimes, but that's the whole faith factor in it. God, he'll shed light on your next step or two, but he's not a mile ahead of time. He's not necessarily going to open that door. And like one of the big lingering things that I had when I moved here, and it was one of those things that I just, I even had bad dreams about once in a while, what opening Sunday was going to be like, and I was going to be up leading singing. And and that's a bad dream and a bad reality for others. You don't want that. And but the whole music end of things was just a great big gigantic question mark. I had no clue how that was going to be addressed, because there's nothing I bring to the table, in regards to that. And it was in November that I got a lead, and Johnny was playing today, and he's sitting over here, and of course everybody knows Johnny as Johnny, and we've been calling him that for over 20 years. But that November, I had a note. The original scrap piece of paper was still in my file where I wrote it down. Lunch appointment, and I had a date written down. Meet with John. I wrote down John. Okay, so for today, Anniversary Sunday, today, don't call him Johnny. If you see him, just call him John. He loves that. But I wrote down meeting with John. Possible answer to prayer with music. And, and we ended up having that lunch meeting, and that was the first of many lunch meetings we've had over the years. And, not only did God open that door and fulfill that need, but God introduced me to a good friend. And that was my very first time of meeting him. And as I was looking through the files, that same scenario was playing out multiple other ways, different faces, different names, and just how God was. I mean, on the one hand, it was kind of like God looked at me and felt sorry for me because I was so naive, and so he bailed me out. And the church got started, and everything was healthy, and we grew and didn't have any major problem. I mean, it's almost like you get that impression when you look at it. But I just got to say that it's been a good exercise for me the last couple of weeks, looking through those files and just being humbled and it being reaffirmed all over again in my mind. God built this church. God is behind this every step of the way, and his fingerprints are all over the place. 21 years ago this month was the first time I ever stepped foot in Shawnee. And I never even asked Colette if she had ever been to Shawnee growing up for any reason. No. And so it was 21 years ago this month was the very first time either of us had ever been in the city limits of Shawnee. Now, I had a favorable impression when we first pulled in town because right away I saw Long John Silver's, and I thought, hey, this is going to be a pretty good place. And, but we had a meeting, an interview scheduled, and we arrived early, so we drove around for a while, not on every street, but a bunch of streets, and just kind of scouting things out and seeing what Shawnee looked like. And, of course, it did look different, especially when you're talking west of Flum. It looked very different 20 years ago as opposed to what it is now. But we had that interview. It was on that day the decision was made. They extended the offer, said, we would like for you to be the person, come in, get this church up off the ground. We accepted the offer in that meeting. And then they asked, we would like for you, if at all possible, to come back on May 6th. Come back to Kansas, not to Shawnee, but to Salina. So it was going to be a little further distance because we were coming from Illinois. But we have the annual CEA meeting. The Christian Evangelizing Association, of course, is the outfit that underwrote my salary for 3 years to give us the time to be able to get the church up off the ground. And so they were having their annual meeting on May 6th, first Friday of every May is when that meeting takes place in Salina. And so I said, yeah, I can't really take vacation time. I don't have that, but I'll make a whirlwind trip and I'll make that meeting. And so a month later, on that Friday, I jumped in the car. I drove all the way to Salina for this meeting. And, and they were wanting to go ahead and introduce me. Because they had already offered me a position I had accepted. And matter of fact, I had already given notice at the church in Illinois that I'd be leaving. I gave them advance 4-month notice so that they would have plenty of time to be searching for my replacement out there. And so all the ducks were kind of lining up in a row. Well, here I am at the annual CEA meeting. And, they pass out the agenda for everybody. They also pass out the finance report. So as the meeting is just getting started, I pick up some of the papers. This is a copy of the original finance report from April, it goes to April 30th, 1994. And I picked this up, figuring that, okay, they just offered me this position, 3 years, financial underwriting, a $20,000 startup fund, to buy a trailer and nursery supplies and a computer and do a phoning project and several mailings and, all that kind of stuff. And so I'm expecting to see some healthy numbers on the finance sheet. And I look at this and it says balance as of April 30th, 1994, $9,200. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, whoa, did they leave off a couple of numbers? It's like 9,000, that's not even half of the startup expense. It's like, wait a minute now, what did I get into here? And, the whole time I was assuming that the CEA was on the up and up. It was a legitimate outfit. And now, I'm like, what's going on here? what have I put my family in the predicament that I'm in now? And so here I am. I'm wrestling with this. The CEA is just like, they made a commitment here that is well over $100,000 to be able to get this new church up off the ground over 3 years. But all they have is $9,000 in the bank. And so I'm kind of, all my notes and thoughts that I had when they were going to introduce me, that's out the window now because I've got something else replacing those thoughts. And it's just like, what is going on? And then someone gets up front, and he was one of the guys that had interviewed me a month earlier. He gets up front, and he says, okay, folks, what we need to do here at this annual meeting, we have all the supporting churches here, is we need to take a vote to see that you're all in agreement that Shawnee should be the city that we start our next church in. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden my attention goes away from this, and I'm like, what did they just say? I'm just like, whoa, you talk about getting a cart before the horse here. I already gave notice. And so I leaned over to the person next to me, and I said, what percentage is required for this to pass? And their response, I don't know. It's like, that's great. This is great. So anyway, they take a vote right then. And then the next thing, and it's right before on the agenda, I'm going to be having a chance to go up front so they can see my face and I can say a couple of words. And so right before that, though, what isn't on the agenda is they say, okay, now we do have a candidate for starting this church, and we would like to present his name, and we need to vote on whether or not to take this person and agree to paying his salary over the next 3 years. And I'm just, by this point in time, my head is spinning. I'm just like, wow, and I look back on all that, and this sheet's what reminded me of all that, this finance sheet. And, and nowadays, here it's 21 years later, and I'm looking back on all that, and if anyone ever wonders if God has a sense of humor, I know he does. He likes to play with us sometimes. And boy, he was having fun with me on that day. Wow. I am so glad we had the opportunity yesterday morning to do that breakfast at Broken Arrow Elementary School to help them out. Yeah, that, as you recall, that was a fundraising breakfast trying to help them have playground equipment, including swings. They've never had swings there, and the original principal, just didn't believe in it, thought that was too dangerous. And so for 25 years, that school has not had swing sets. And, and so this was a fundraiser, and we ended up raising yesterday at this pancake feed just under half of the amount of money, $2,000 and some dollars, that will go toward that. So they're well on their way now to having the money in hand to be able to complete that goal of having a swing set and all this playground stuff. But it was long overdue. It was long overdue for us to do something by way of expressing our appreciation to the Broken Arrow Elementary School and just overall to the Shawnee Mission School District. I don't know if you guys know this. I almost included this as part of the trivia questions last night. But even our core group, the people that are part of our original core, probably have no clue what it cost us per Sunday in the early days to have church at Broken Arrow School on a Sunday morning. Because I was the one writing out those checks back in those days. For one Sunday, the cost was $129.92. Even for a brand new church getting started, that is affordable. And that's just all the more reason why we as a church 20 years later ought to be grateful, to the school district, ought to be grateful to the principals, that put up with us during those almost 9 years, that we were meeting there. But so I'm just glad we had that opportunity. Mike Brewer is the principal at the school now, and Mike and his wife, they come here to Crossroads, and so it's kind of neat. We got that added connection, now with the church. So I'm grateful everyone that participated in making that possible yesterday. Thank you for being a part of that. A lot has happened over the last 20 years. A lot has happened. For those of you that were at the banquet last night, you might recognize what's over here on the east wall, that timeline. We went ahead and put it over here, and there are some markers over there on some music stands. If you didn't get a chance to add in when you became a part of the church, or when you were baptized or married in the church or whatever, you can add, those kind of notes to our timeline. But that just illustrates, as did the video or the slideshow we saw just a moment ago, that a lot has happened over the last 20 years. And from all these years, I've got a lot of special memories, and I don't have enough time, to talk about them. But one of the memories that comes to mind is when Greg Snell, which at the time we didn't have elders, but he is one of the elders of the church now. Greg Snell and I, on April 7th, 1995, that was 2 days, that was a Friday, 2 days before opening Sunday, we were walking around right here on this property. As a matter of fact, where the building sits right now, this was an alfalfa field. There was an old farmhouse and some other buildings here, and then down the hill there was an old barn. But right where the footprint of this building and right in front, this was all alfalfa field. And we not only, the old farmer, Lawrence Zilhart, walked us and showed us a couple of the houses, walked in the houses that were being rented out. But we even walked out into the middle of the alfalfa field. So we were probably standing right out there in the entry area, literally in that spot, and just looking at the property. And he was really wanting us to buy it. And again, it was one of those things where you're thinking cart before the horse. We're talking about buying property, and we haven't even had opening Sunday yet. And it's a long story to explain how that meeting all came about. But that's one of the special memories that I have, of just thinking, what if this is God's will, that this property, he's going to use this spot to accomplish some really cool things in years to come. And to be able to have been a part of that and to be able to see that all come to realization. In fact, I signed the paperwork that and when the church bought the property, the first Friday of July of that opening summer and that first year. And it was just a couple of weeks later, we took a bunch of our core group and a bunch of others that were a part of our first Sunday crowd that came. There were 25 of us that came out here on the property, and this is another good memory. And we created a prayer circle, right here, not having any clue when we would ever break ground, when we would ever build a building, how many years are we going to meet in a school building. I mean, we didn't have answers to any of those questions, but we had just signed the paperwork, just bought the property, and I put out a notice, and 25 people showed up one Wednesday, and we created that prayer circle, and we just prayed that God would be glorified on this land, that things that would happen here would draw people close to him, and that his word would be faithfully preached, and important decisions of faith would be made on this spot. And it's just really cool. And it's a good memory that stuck with me all this time. Now, I've got other good memories, too, that aren't quite as inspiring, but they are kind of fun. I'm in 2000 and 2002, we had the groundbreaking here. And part of our whole groundbreaking celebration and all involved Demolition Day. Some of you remember that? We had a whole bunch of sledgehammers and stuff, and we just let people go to town on these buildings that were here, and just, and I mean, it got crazy. And, there were bricks going through windows, and, there was some stuff there that God was looking out for us, that nobody got hurt. But in the middle of all of that, someone says, "Look at Robert Allen." And And Robert, was like, well, where's Robert Allen? And we looked around, and there's all this chaos going on, as demolition days taking place. And we look up on the roof of the 2-story farmhouse, and there's Robert Allen. It's a steep roof over the kitchen, and he's walking out on that thing with his ankles turned, according to the angle of the roof, and he's carrying a sledgehammer. He's going all the way out to the end where there is a brick chimney that sticks up 3 or 4 feet in the air, and he's bound and determined he's going to swing that sledgehammer however many times it takes till that chimney falls down. And you eventually got it, didn't you? And I mean, man, there were times he had to regain his balance, and it was like everything came to a standstill as we were watching Robert. And I'm thinking, okay, I always wondered what my first funeral would be like, and yes. But yeah, you talk about special memories. But as I think about my favorite memories, hands down, I come up with what my best memories are. There's not even a close second place. I mean, those things that I've said, those are all good memories. But by far, the best memories over the last 20 years involve each time a decision of faith was made by a person. That's the best memories. I think about all the people that over the years that have said yes to Jesus, and all the people in obedience have been baptized into Christ. And like I said last night, we had to be creative with baptisms because we didn't have something like this available. And we borrowed a couple churches, but we used hot tubs, swimming pools, Shawnee Mission, Park Lake, and I don't think we ever used the Kansas River, but we used pretty much any other body of water that was around, to be obedient to what the Lord had called us to do. But, I've got to say that by far is the best memories of all from the last 20 years, and they're scattered throughout those 20 years. Friends, this is what I want you to know today on a serious note. Crossroads is in the business of doing all we can to depopulate hell. I mean, in a very real sense. That's using different terminology than maybe you're used to. But that is what we're doing. That's what we've been called to do. Now, I'm not saying that it's our calling to depopulate hell in the present tense, that whatever the population of hell is right now, to kind of get that number lower, because we really can't do anything about the present population. But I'm talking about the potential population, the future population of hell. We can do something about that. We can do something about that by being faithful to what we've been called to do. And I'm not just talking locally. I mean, obviously, it's locally we are to be involved in this, but it's also nationally and on the world scene. And that's why we partner with groups like Team Expansion, and we help, with supporting Harvey and Nancy and the work they're doing in Jordan, or we're going to be partnering here with, and the decision had already been made to do this with Jeff and Indra as they go to New Zealand to start a church there. And that's why we're doing this, is because this is our business. This is what we are about as a church. This is our calling. You see, church isn't just for creating social activities. I've lost track of the number of people that have come up to me already this morning in the first service and leading into this one. And they said, man, I really enjoyed last night. Oh, that was so fun. And a bunch of people have already said that. And I enjoyed it too. Especially the speaking parts, because I thought our speaker was great. No, I enjoyed it, but here's the thing. That is not the purpose of the church, to create enjoyable social activities. There's nothing wrong with what we did last night. Mind you, understand what I'm trying to say here. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, we have ice cream socials. We have various things. We have picnics. We do things like that. But that ultimately is not what the church is about. The church isn't just about creating an opportunity that can create new friendships. But I can tell you what, my best friends, the people that I'm closest to, are a part of the fellowship of this church. Even if they sold their motorcycle. And that's one of the dynamics that happens in a setting like this. But that ultimately is not the purpose of the church, to create friendships. It's not just for the purpose of filling in time slots on our calendar, although it has a way of doing that sometimes. It's not just for the purpose of creating fond memories, and I've already shared some with you, and others are sharing some on our timeline over there. I mean, all those things are good, but that is not what the church is called for. You see, we are here because there's a need, and we've been equipped to do something about it. This is the bottom line. This church exists because there is a need for this church to exist. And God has equipped us in a way that we can address that need. We can fulfill that need. And that is, people need the Lord. Let me show you the way Paul said it in Romans chapter 1, verse 16. He said, I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. I'm not ashamed of the gospel. We as a church should never be ashamed of the gospel. It's what has been given to us, and it is what has saved our souls. But it was never intended when we receive the gospel that we keep it to ourselves. It's then we're in the place then to pass it on to others. That's what the church is all about. That's the business of the church, to take this good word and to share it with others that need it just as desperately as we needed it. That's what we've been called to do. And it ought to be fresh in our mind what the gospel is. We just talked about the last 2 Sundays. 2 weeks ago, we talked about Jesus being arrested, and with that, we talked about his flogging and his crucifixion. Last Sunday, we talked about his resurrection. Therein is the gospel, the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. The price that our Lord was willing to pay for us to be set free from our sin. We're going to do things in a little different order today. At this time, our ushers are going to be getting up and preparing for our time of communion. Okay? And this is a good thing for us to focus on. Look again at this verse. Romans chapter 1, verse 16. I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. Might we never be ashamed of the cross and what happened on the cross. Yeah, we feel bad that Jesus had to go through what he went through, but we should be filled with gratitude that he did it, because had he not done it, we would be without hope today. That's what was necessary for us to be able to have the hope of eternity. And so during this time of communion, when you take the bread and you eat it in the cup and you drink from it, you remember the body and the blood of Jesus and the sacrifice that he made on your behalf. And you let those words resonate in your mind. I am not ashamed of the gospel, because that's what I hang my hope on. And that's what I share with others. That's what we in the church are in the business of getting the word out, so others too have something to celebrate. Let's pray. Father, thank you. Thank you for reminding us today that this is what makes the difference. It's the sacrifice that Jesus made when he went to the cross and he died on our behalf. And then he was buried. But he didn't stay buried, for on the third day he rose again, securing the victory, not just for himself, but he secured the victory for all of us who in faith embrace him. He made it possible for us to be set free from our sin. So we have the hope of eternal life. Father, today, in this place where there used to be an alfalfa field, we gather here today and we celebrate our Lord Jesus Christ.